Yes, Mr. Maleka, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mabuza, we were at page seven, and we were dealing with your evidence relating to Mr. Lambeti. I take it that you have said what you wanted to say. We now go to the evidence relating to Mr. Sibulela.
Yeah, Chairman, as I indicated, that there are reasons for departing the board were not necessarily the same. Mr. Sibulela resigned on the 19th of October owing to an undeclared interest in one of the tenders on the ICT space. The issue of that tender predates by about 5 years this board in office. It's been a tender that has been out there for the last 5 or so years. It turns out that Mr. Sibulela also, long before he joined the ESCOM board, he had a relationship of being a subcontractor to one of the bidders in a general arrangement that as and when they get jobs anywhere, they would subcontract to him or his company.
What's the name of that bidder?
The name of the bidder is EOH. But this relationship predates, as I said, Mr. Sibulela on the board. So when Mr. Sibulela joined the board, as I have demonstrated in my own declaration, this particular relationship was not disclosed in a general declaration. When these bids finally came to the board through its various committees had reached a point to recommend that they would reopen this process, and I would think the committee actually mentioned from a strategic point what it would do. I think the committee recommended to the board that instead of taking this one contract and give it to one vendor, they were gonna give it to about 6 vendors, break these various tender to those 6. One of those 6 that was bidding is the very company EOH. But prior to this, there seemed to have been a specific subcontracting. There was a general one that if we get jobs in this space, we'll work with you. Then there was a specific one that says, we are bidding for this job at ESCOM, we want you to be our subcontractor. That's what we finally got to hear from the bidder. Because, as I said, he did not disclose and declare this as his general, in his general declaration. He did not disclose it as a specific declaration. At the start of every board meeting, on the one side, the audit and forensic team would send material that says, we're about to go into a meeting to look at something like this. Please note member so-and-so, either as per your own declaration or on our own findings, you are to be seen to be an interested person. And then they cause that to be shared to the company secretary, and you get told. So you would be able to know that you are, if you had forgotten, you would be ably reminded. So in this particular instance, this did not happen because it was not disclosed, generally and specifically. Secondly, when the bidders themselves do get to be asked the same questions as to do they have anybody in ESCOM, in whatever position, who could be of conflict. The bidder this particular time has disclosed and has mentioned that Mr. Sibulela is related to them. So on hearing that, the audit and forensic people raised the issue. As they raised the issue, I then approached him to say, there is this matter. He said, no, I don't know about it. And then the decision, where this decision was taken about the strategic approach, he was not at that meeting. But there was a round-robin resolution that was being circulated. He participated in that round-robin resolution, which means he would have seen the material. He might not have remembered that he was related, but he therefore participated in the process that he should not have participated in. So I then confronted him after now he's now signed the resolution. I said, this thing has come up again. He said, no, I don't know about this. I said, but Georgie, this comes from the bidder. Why would they want to prejudice themselves by saying they have you who would cause them? I don't understand. He said, no, I didn't. So I said to him, there's information here about your company and your ID. I know you very well. He says, well, no, it's not me. Maybe they got it from the office. Okay. I then went back to the team and said, guys, in this day of fake news, this might be fake. They then produced a document he had signed of this contractual arrangement. I then confronted him with same, and he said, no. You know what, Chairman? I leave my stamp, my signature stamp somewhere. This could be one of those. At which point I said to him, well, I think you've got bigger problems than this. If you have your stamp that you don't know where it is, you don't know who's signing on your behalf, I would be more worried if I were you. Anyway, this is where we are, and I think you've got to do the right thing. I said, no, leave me, let me think about it. So I let him think about it, and then unfortunately this thing is now in the public domain. These newspapers have got certain deadlines they're working on. This time is now a Friday afternoon. We can't hold this any further. The weekend papers are calling to say they're going to print if they don't get a response, at which point I then called him, and then I then drafted a resignation for him on a text. I said, I think you now need to resign by returning this SMS to me. By this time, I've advised the person who's appointed him that, Minister, I'm dealing with this. Because of time, this is our proposal, we deal with it. I'll draft this. When he gets it, I will receive it, I'll forward it to you. And if it's okay, Minister, if I receive it given time, can I accept it on your behalf? The minister said, yes, you may go ahead. So, of course, after a long time, he still doesn't feel he should do this. But in his words, which I appreciated, was, in the interest of clean corporate governance, I will leave. So he then sent me that text. Within seconds, of course, I responded and indicated, I do accept your resignation on behalf of the minister, and the minister will be advised accordingly. That's what happened, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mabuza. Questions of process. Where was the weakness in the system which led to this controversy, as far as you can pick up? I mean, all of you have declared when you took office. The declarations are updated by the audit and risk individuals in ESCOM, and yet they fail to pick up.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I thought about this in the context of the previous point, that it's highly unlikely that the process could pick up something that is not available. So it's up to me, who knows. I know who I deal with. I know where interests I have are. And indeed, even outside of issues of conflict of interest, excuse me, if I know that I occupy a position like I do at ESCOM, and there's a certain behavior, privately and publicly, that's expected of me, and that is not yet in the public domain, that I've already breached that. Bad example, I've already assaulted someone, and the matter is going through the various processes. It's not everybody would get to know that I'm charged for assault, and if they do, I'll tell them the matter is still in court. Only I know that I've got that matter. So if I consider my office just outside of the narrow constraints of what I need to do, I need to at least take one of those people that my reporting officer say, you may not be aware, this thing might or might not come out, that I am currently being charged for assault. I would propose that I be given leave so that I don't affect the good office that I occupy. So those things might not necessarily be there. So I say the issue of declaration and management of conflicts has first and foremost have to start from the interested officer. I have to declare it, as I've indicated in my own form. Anything that I have not disclosed here is what has not yet happened or I don't know I'm doing. The things I know I'm doing that are of a commercial nature, I have declared up front. Whether they are known by someone else or not, I have declared. So in this particular instance, I don't know how else would the board, the officers have found out if he did not declare. But because the system is such that even the tenderer must state, so if the tenderer did not disclose, we would have known when maybe more damage would have been caused. So it now is back to the individual. That individual that occupy these offices need to be honest, ethical, and sincere in their declarations, first and foremost. So if there's a flaw, I would argue that maybe George should have declared more.
Thank you. I'm grateful for that. But can I suggest to you what I conceive to be a weakness in the system beyond the good faith or lack of it on the part of an appointee or candidate for such a responsible office as you hold? And I say so because it has now become clear evidence before the chairperson that individuals are appointed to serious office without any prior background check by those who have the power to appoint. And Chair, you now have evidence before you about the issue we are dealing with on 1.7 or 1.8 relating to Treasury's appointment of special advisors and so on. And the evidence we have so far is that the minister concerned was appointed on the 9th. The next day, advisors and chief of staff are appointed, which suggests that if ever there was an opportunity to do background search, it would have taken less than a day. So where I would like your comment is this. A proper background investigation to candidates for appointment would at least establish minimum information relating to probity questions around the candidates concerned. Do you agree?
I do.
And that background investigation ought to be done before, at least well before, the appointment is made.
I agree.
And in this case, in your case, the appointment was made almost on the same day when it was publicly announced.
I agree.
In the light of all of those matters that you and I agree on, what would be your recommendation in order to make sure that declarations go beyond the good faith disclosures of the candidates for appointment?
Yeah, as I indicated, Chairman, earlier about my issue of privacy, I also do come from a place where, for me to have continued to be a key employee and chief executive officer at Zuhosan, I had to always be of acceptable probity. And any and everything that I disclosed or did not disclose was available. I was signing as I disclosed to the officers, the gaming boards, that you can go to anybody, anywhere in the world, and take any information about me. And should you find any of those to suggest that I'm not fit nor proper to occupy this office, I would know that I'm putting the license that Zuhosan has at risk, and Zuho would be given at least the opportunity to remedy that by removing me from office or face the consequences. So this maybe brings me to the point. Advocate Malika referred me, when he was talking about my declaration, to a date of July, when we're still talking about when I was appointed. It is that document under the Annexure C, Chair, that is under tab 6.
It's U5, Chair. It's Exhibit U5.
Yeah, what page was it again?
It starts at page 140.
I do remember the reference to July
Yeah,
2018. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry to do this, but I think it's an important point to make. That date is not a date related to my appointment. That date is the date at which this form is being revised in the policy processes of ESCOM.
Yes.
So I just don't want an impression to be left that I joined in January. Now we've settled on the date, whether it's the 19th or the 20th or 22nd. But only in July did I declare my interest.
No,
it's important that we get
No,
that right.
you can take it for granted that your evidence is clear on this.
Yes, no, I thought I would mention that it was quite clear. I mean, you did say you made the disclosure, the declaration, I think still in January, I think quite soon after your appointment. But that July 2018, it's also indicated there, it's revised. So, and you did talk about how it gets updated. So, yeah, that was clear.
I'm glad that the chairman with that. So to Advocate Malika's question, as we go forward in updating these various probity forms, if I may call them that way, one of the learnings, at least, would be that, I guess the very least you can do is, you've told us everything there is for you to tell us, the truth, all the truth on this day. Should we find anything that it's not in line with this, we then must exercise a particular sanction. That's the one part. The other part is we must, I don't know what else you do to know whether a person has told you everything, as in this particular instance. The third point is, as Advocate Malika says, here in the case of this, where the shareholder, the government, appoints people to these boards, they need to spend a little bit more time before they appoint them, to be sure and know that the person they're appointing is the person they want to appoint, knowing what they know about that person. There's a lot in the public space about this type of situation that I guess they are a bit of an embarrassment.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You are close to ministers. You have mentioned the example of probity investigation in the gambling industry. And from what you told us, you commend that model of prior probity investigation. And I leave it to you to suggest some such options to avoid these things, because they are likely to happen unless we address them.
To confirm, I'm close to them by the office I occupy.
Yes. The last person of the board that you are leading, who was forced or called upon to resign because of possible questions of conflict of interest, is the person you name at paragraph 21 on page 7 of your statement. Do you see that?
Yeah, I do.
Give us some sort of contextual appreciation of why that person was called upon to resign.
This current Minister of Public Enterprise has taken a view, Chairman, that none of his staff, his office, his officials should occupy positions on state-owned boards that they've got to have oversight on. Previous ministers had a different take on this. So Ms. Jackie Mudisane is an official that's been working and continues to work for the Department of Public Enterprise. Minister Gordon has had a preference that he did not think that creates sufficient distance between the shareholder and the board. So he decided that he was gonna ask her to resign, and accordingly she's employed by the department, so she's resigned from the board.
Well, Mr. Mabuza, unless you have further issues to raise, I would like now to go to the meat of your evidence. And of course, you introduce that part of your evidence from paragraph 23. And I would like you to reflect on what you were so emphatically prepared to talk about through that graphic description, that procurement is a disguised way of expressing corruption. I hope that I'm not misquoting you.
Well, you may be. I don't think he said that. Well, he said procurement is the game.
Yes, corruption is the name.
Yeah.
And then, what is the game?
The game is procurement,
Okay.
to do corruption. I said corruption is the name, procurement is the game.
Yes, to a simple, idle mind like me, what does that mean in lay terms?
What that means is what we see and we call corruption is what happens in the procurement of goods and services in the public sector. That's, we call it corruption, but the real deal, the real incidents, the real happening, the real goings on is what happens in the procurement. And we have come to see it in a number of manifestations at ESCOM.
Chair, you remember we led the evidence of Mr. Matebula right early on,
Yes.
who told you that the total public procurement bill is in the order of 800 million, as I recall.
billion.
Billion. Yes.
Yeah,
And that half of it is characterized by non-compliance with the PFMA. He did not go as far as to suggest that all of that non-compliance constitute corruption, but it more or less fits in within the scheme of Mr. Mabuza's observation that
yeah.
I would not want to misdescribe.
But there is, if I may, Chairman, there is
Yes.
perhaps the need to state this, and public office bearers and public people in the public service use this line a lot, that irregular expenditure is not always wasteful, fruitless, and corrupt.
Yes,
The irregularity comes out of being irregular relative to the prescripts of the Public Finance Management Act. It might be a narrow way of looking at it, but there is corruption that is over and above irregular expenses as per the PFMA.
yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there would be bona fide transactions that which have got some irregularity, but the irregularity has nothing to do with corruption.
That's correct. That's what I'm saying.
It's somebody who misunderstood genuinely some requirement or thought that the circumstances were such that genuinely thought that there was no need to comply with a particular requirement, but it's genuine.
Agreed.
And then there are those where everybody knows this is what you are supposed to do, but they don't do it because it doesn't suit their purposes. And that's where you get into corruption.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Now, I'm going to get to the details of that topic because you begin with it from page 18, paragraph 51 of your statement. But before I go there, I just want to confirm that you have dealt with some of the issues you describe in the interposing paragraphs before that. And remember, we had finished what you had dealt with up to paragraph 22 on page 7. I'd like to move quite quickly with those interposing paragraphs because you've dealt with some of them. In paragraph, on page 8 from paragraph 23, you set out in detail what you as the new board found when you got in there. You have dealt with it as far as I'm aware, and I don't think there's a need to repeat it, Chair. And then in paragraph...
Yes, he may, if there is something that he wants to highlight which he thinks we haven't covered, just highlight that. Otherwise, he certainly has dealt with some.
Thank you, Chair.
I have dealt with it.
Yes.
Thank you.
And so would be the case from chapter 3 of your statement, beginning at page 10, paragraph 29. You give us the background of ESCOM's corporate governance. And then in paragraph 31 on page 11, going up to 35 on page 12, you talk about ESCOM's conflict of interest policy and the declarations that are required from members of the board. And you have dealt with that topic now quite adequately. Do you agree?
I did accept to just emphasize that on page 10, that paragraph 30,
Yes.
that when you look at that table at the bottom of page 10, this table says, as at January, for a board that was appointed in January 2018, by the time I submitted this statement, which was, must get the dates right now. Which was signed on the 16th of January, 2019. It's almost a year.
Yeah.
This board, Chairman, and its various committees has had 61 meetings. A year does not have 61 weeks. So this does just speak to an anomaly. I just wanted to state this, the amount of time non-executive directors of ESCOM spend at ESCOM, and each board meeting lasts an average of 8 hours. It's unusual. 4, 6 board meetings a year is what
Is normal.
So the dysfunctionality that the president was talking about when he spoke about ESCOM is manifest by the non-executive spending more time, almost to the point where I don't think this non-executive tag, which speaks to they either are overreaching or there is a vacuum. I just wanted to make that observation.
Well, it's the nature of your mandate to go and clean up. You can't behave as usual when there is a special task to deal with.
Except I'm not complaining.
Yes.
Just want it to be seen in the context of effort versus reward.
No, I'm grateful for that. And can I ask you to reflect on that table and raise one?
Or well, maybe you are not complaining about having to attend so many meetings, but maybe you are complaining about the situation that has brought that about.
And it's unsustainable, Chairman. There has to come a time when you've got to create enough distance from the executives to not be player and referee themselves,
Yes.
non-executives rather.
Yeah.
One of the unique governance structures of ESCOM, insofar as the interface between the board and the senior executives is concerned, is this animal called the Board Tender Committee. I'd like to elicit your thoughts on it, because we know that in this case, allegations of state capture impacted quite heavily on what the BTC, the Board Tender Committee, did. My understanding of the delegation of authority of ESCOM is that the Board Tender Committee is an organ of the board. It is the board operating on a narrow scale of its members and a narrow scale of mandate relating to procurement. Do you agree with that model of the mandate of the BTC?
Firstly, the name of this committee, in as far as the board I lead, is a bit of a misnomer. The committee of the board that is currently in office does not sit and adjudicate tenders. One of the mandates that in announcing our appointments, the Deputy President of the Republic at the time referred to was board members should desist from being involved in adjudicating tenders. So it's been called the Board Tender Committee. I have not experienced this committee adjudicating tenders. But I nevertheless did not stop from executing that mandate of ensuring that board members do not get involved in tenders and also disband this committee. It does no longer exist at ESCOM governance structures as we speak today. Historically, this is what happened at ESCOM. I might get some of my numbers incorrect. These executives at ESCOM, either as individuals or attaching to their positions, they carry big responsibilities as dimensioned in their dedicated schedule of authorities of what they can spend before they go one level up. I got to be aware that I might get it wrong. I won't remember what each of the heads of various divisions, as in generation, distribution, and finance, and or transmission, their schedule of authority. But anything that is above 500 million, and where I come from, 500 million is a lot of money. At ESCOM, as I indicated, they spend on primary energy 95 billion. So 500 million is a level that is attached to a certain office or officer or a group of officers. Then the next level was then 750 million. Above 750 million, it must go to the tender, the board tender committee. But when it comes to the board tender committee, it's not for the board tender committee to adjudicate tenders. Yes. It's to say we have decided that you should procure from supplier A these various product or service at this price. This we confirm, this is as per the strategy on sourcing this particular product or service that was approved by a board at such and such a point. And I guess what this committee can do is oversight, just to ask the kind of questions. And I'll give you an example of a question I had asked in one of these meetings. Was, here is this individual that has been given a tender to supply, I think it was fuel, for about $1 billion, some number like that. But clearly, because it's outside of the purview of the executives, it comes to this board for oversight. So now this committee is submitting it to the board. So I ask the question, guys, why did you ask these people to complete in the questionnaire previous values of businesses they've run before? And I just want to see whether they can carry this amount of value in business, okay? Why did you ask them the question, when were they established? No, just so as to establish that they've got the requisite experience. I thought so, I said. But now explain this one to me. You are recommending that we must buy fuel from this supplier who was set up the week before you closed for calling for tenders. And by their own admission, they tell you the biggest amount of business they've ever carried is 10 million rand. And you want us to say it's okay to give them a 1.5 billion contract. That's what you want us to do. That's the one example. The other example, they present a case to the board of this is what we must approve, whatever amount, over 1 billion. And then I ask the question, where is this person who submitted this document from the office? No, this person is suspended. What is this person suspended for? No, this person was involved in another matter, and so what happened? No, she confessed that she was involved in such and such a transgression. Oh, okay, so why are you suspending her? So that we can investigate. So we want to investigate a confession. Is that what you want to do? Well, where I come from, when you see something like this, as a matter of course, anything that comes from this person, I'll have to go, the onus would be on them to prove that here they have not done wrong. Because the only thing I know, they do wrong. Maybe here, exceptionally, they've managed not to do wrong. So I'm just trying to show you that what this committee and the board ought to would have been oversight, not to actually say do give, don't give, pay or don't pay. So what we've then now done, we then when we finally disbanded this, because you had to go through a process, you had to change your governance structures and do what you had to do. It took a bit of time. Where we finally settled is we don't have a bond tender committee as we speak.
Since when?
June, July, August. But it's the last quarter of calendar year 2018. So what we then did, we disbanded the board tender committee. Since January this year. The work we did last year, we said from January or February this year, there will be none. So there's been none. What we've done in its place, or another thing that kind of like seemed odd, the chief executive of the company does not sit in the board tender committee. Below the board tender committee, there's the so-called ETC, which I guess stands for the Executive Tender Committee. The chief executive does not sit on that committee. So the chief executive, if he was not a director, he would not know what his business is buying from whom for what. Because procurement reports through finance, and I'm passing no judgment whether that's right or wrong, but decisions of buying, I thought some of them the chief executive ought to know and own. So we would sit in the board when the BTC presents the stuff, and Pagamani, the CEO, he too would be hearing of these things for the first time, which we thought that was not right. How can we hold him accountable as the commander-in-chief here when he doesn't command this part? So we then decided, either than disbanding the board tender committee, one of the things we're going to do, we're going to up the limits, the levels of what this executive committee should do. We're going to up the levels of what the chief procurement officer will be. We will keep the chief procurement to report through the finance, but above a certain level, the chief executive will chair a committee, which is a committee just before it comes to the board. But when it comes to the board, we will then let this be done by the Investment and Finance Committee to just have oversight on this as against adjudicating tenders. So I guess this would be akin to the level above the chief executive of a bank, who's not a member of the credit committee, and a level above him that the board could have 2 or 3 independent members that have got oversight on decisions that the chief executive has taken.
Thank you, Chair. Can I move on
to
another topic? Yes. Thank you. And I take it that you have now realigned your DOA to reflect those changes.
Correctly.
Yes. From paragraph 31 on page 11, you talk about probity questions and the declarations. We've dealt with those matters unless you want us to revisit them.
No.
And they go up to page 18, paragraph 50. Are you comfortable that we should start with the essence of your evidence relating to how you dealt with allegations of corruption as and when you picked up as the new board? You start with the topic relating to disciplinary processes taken by the new board. Do you see that?
Yep.
And in paragraph 52, you mention names. We'll get to some of these names. But my recollection is that you, as the new board, were mandated or in fact required by the portfolio committee, which investigated allegations into state capture, to undertake or take disciplinary actions against senior executives of ESCOM. We have taken the chairperson in your absence to several of the recommendations by the portfolio committee that the new board should take those actions. We have also taken the chairperson to the Fundusi report, which recommended disciplinary actions. I'm not going to go through that ground again. I'm now going to move from the premise that you accept as a matter of statutory and corporate obligations that you had that duty. And what you did was to try and fulfill it by instituting disciplinary processes. Is that a fair premise to move on?
That's correct.
Yes. This morning you gave us Exhibit UM. Sorry, U5, Chair.
I was wondering where that one came from.
Sorry, U5.
Okay.
We'll get back to your statement, but I would like to deal with the contents of Exhibit U5. And Mr. Mabuza, your evidence in this regard will canvass Part A of Exhibit U5. And you will see that Part A has several sections, and they start from Section 1 to Section 7. Do you see that?
Yeah, correct.
And subject to the direction of the chairperson, I'm going to start with them in reverse, and it will become clear later on why I do so. Chair, you will see that the sequence of the documentation relating to the DC
Yes.
begins from Section 2.
Yes.
And it goes on up to Section 7, as I've indicated. But with your leave, I would like to start with the disciplinary charges as are contained in Section 7 from page 107.
Yes, you may proceed, that's fine.
Are you at page 107 of U5?
It looks like the one he's looking at is a much thicker liver arch file than my U5.
Can I ask the points person from Bowman to guide the chairperson?
Yes. Somebody is going to assist you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you at page 107?
Yes.
Page 107. Almost towards the end of that bundle.
Thank you. Yes, I am on page 107.
That letter is from Bowman. What's the date of the letter?
The date of the letter is 27 February 2018.
Who is the addressee?
The addressee is Mr. Sean Maritz.
What does it tell him?
I beg your
What does the letter tell him?
The letter tells him that he is required to attend a disciplinary hearing by an independent chairman, Senior Counsel Advocate Tim Brinders, on the 8th and the 9th of March in 2018. At a venue to be advised, he would have to face charges as contained in Annexure A, and ESCOM intends to be legally represented in the disciplinary hearing by our firm and counsel. and you are similarly permitted to get legal representation should you so wish.
As at 27th of February 2018, what did Mr. Maritz do at ESCOM?
You mean in terms of the position he was occupying?
Yes.
What position was he occupying, if you do know, Mr. Mabuza?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I indicated earlier that when we arrived at Megawatt Park with the incoming interim CEO, Pagamani Hadebe, it was the 22nd of January. I, as the new landlord, I had to come and tell the tenant, who was Mr. Sean Maritz, to hand over the keys to the new tenant, Pagamani Hadebe. Mr. Maritz had read about that on the paper. I had called him from Rome to tell him I'm coming to release him of his tenancy and he should go back to his position as the Chief Information Officer, as we now have a new interim CEO. So when I got there, I did just that.
So I understand that you had to relieve him of the tenancy, but what tenancy did he occupy?
He was acting chief. He was, what did they call them again? They were rotational. They did some rotational stuff. Couple of weeks before we were appointed, towards the end of the previous calendar year, he was brought in to be the acting chief executive after Mr. Johnny Ladler. So Sean was acting chief executive of ESCOM at the time when I arrived.
He was the #1 senior executive of ESCOM in an acting capacity.
At that time, he was the big chief.
Yes.
And as in February, he was, of 2018, he had gone back to the position of
Yes,
chief.
on the 22nd, I formally asked him to go back to his position as chief
Financial
information officer.
Or information officer.
Chief information officer.
Okay, thank you.
The charges that appear from page 108 are asserted against him in the context of a specific office. And just to guide all of us, the preamble of it says, it is alleged that in your position as the interim group chief executive, you committed serious acts of misconduct. Alternatively, gross negligence in terms of the ESCOM disciplinary code, which is destructive of the trust required for an ongoing employment relationship. And you set out the specific provisions of the code that deal with that charge. So let me confirm first thing first. He was charged in his capacity as the acting group chief executive officer. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And you have read these charges before, and I'd like to take you to the components of them. I begin with charge 1. Can I ask you to read it out, please, so that we all have the substance, if not the text of that charge?
Charge 1, you breached your duties and responsibilities as an executive and or breach of 2.1, 2.28, and or 2.29 and or 2.30 and or 2.35 of the code, and you or you conducted yourself in a way that is unacceptable in terms of ESCOM values and ethics, and or you committed financial misconduct under the PFMA and or exposed ESCOM to significant financial and reputational risk and harm, in relation to an asset development finance framework agreement between Huarong Energy Proprietary Limited, Africa Proprietary Limited, and Eskom Holding SOC, and a fee letter committing Eskom to an immediate payment, of $21,800,000 or approximately 340 million South African rands. Fee letter. In this regard, it is alleged specifically that you...
Stop. That's lawyers speak. In essence, what did you find as the new board relating to Mr. Maritz that gave rise to this charge?
The time of our appointment and the time of some of these developments as they are properly covered in the charge sheet is worth referring to. Yes. This is January 22, 2018. As it is normal course, I'm now meeting the old tenant. I'm asking him to hand over to the new tenant. We're meeting him in his office, and I asked him to take us through all the things that he thinks we should be aware of. He tells us everything, except he doesn't tell us that barely 30 days before we arrived, he had signed these documents committing Eskom to this amount. For us to only know a few weeks later that these documents are alive as recent as when we were talking to him. So we felt that was serious enough to suspend him and subject him to a disciplinary hearing. Yes. The chair would be aware the names that are mentioned on the list. There are 7 names. Yes. Mr. Maritz became the only person that we suspended ourselves when we got to Eskom is Mr. Maritz. The others, the 7, when we got there, they were at various stages of their suspension, and so they were not there when we got there. Yes. So he's the only one that when we got there, we suspended. As I said, for not having, it's a very material point to have told the incoming chief executive that yesterday I've signed committing you to a fee of 340 million rand, which is part of a $1 billion funding that we've agreed to take.
Yes. Mr. Mabuza, I mean, you are the incoming chair and you're talking to your commander on the ground, and he is giving you a report on the status of Eskom, which you will inherit as the board. I'd like to elicit some details to the extent that you are able to give them to us. We now know that you were appointed on the 20th, and you indicated that you immediately went to Eskom to get a report back. To get a report, a status report. You meet Mr. Maritz, more or less when?
On the 22nd.
On the 22nd.
On Monday, the 22nd of January.
Yes. And he gives you a detail of what was happening. What I'd like to understand from you is that, was it a verbal report, or was there any written report, or did a written report come thereafter?
No, it was not a written report. We had met him in the office, and I introduced myself to him. As I said, I had called him to tell him I'm landing by this time, and Paramani will meet me at the airport. We will drive to Eskom together. And as the person At home, we had to first greet him and then tell him what he had read in the newspapers, as you indicated, on the Sunday. Yes. But also the issue of the impending change of the leadership of ESCOM was not something that just suddenly happened that week. Long before I went on holiday in December, I chaired a meeting in December of the business community where the Minister of Finance then, Malusi Kikaba, had asked for the business community to submit names for consideration to the board of ESCOM. So it was a very topical issue. Yes. That the board, the leadership would change. Yeah. So the point I'm trying to make is some of his actions, whether it's on the 8th of December or the 26th of December 2017, with the then chairman, they both knew that at the very least, if they could, unless it's a matter of life and death, they could hold this, unless it was, as I finally settled, that it was, let's get whatever we can get in the basket, the supermarket's about to close. So, and when we meet him, he tells us everything but this particular matter, yes. Which that was, personally, that was my major problem about it.
Yes. Thanks for the detail. So I take it that you were with Mr. Pakamani when you met Mr. Maritz?
Correct.
Yes. And he tells you everything but the Huarong deal. Before these charges were formally launched by Bowmans on behalf of ESCOM, did you have an occasion to speak to Mr. Maritz about this non-disclosure? Did you confront him and find out why he did not tell you about this important deal?
If not me personally, Pagamani would have, because we had discussed this with Pagamani before we approached Bowman and told them that this is the problem, this is the seriousness at which we look at this thing, and we need to suspend and call him to. He would have been told. I can't recall whether I was in the same room when he was told that, or Pagamani would have told him alone.
But you don't recall?
I don't recall. Okay. Okay. But I know he was told.
All right. And you then, sorry, I stopped you when you were about to deal with the details of the charges on page 108, paragraph 1.1. I'd like you to continue and indicate what were the elements of the factual grounding relating to the charge.
Thank you. Just to confirm, he did not see these charges for the first time on this letter. He was told what was wrong, that he was going to be suspended. He was told. This followed having been told by Pagamani. That
Give us some sense of what you personally know before this letter was sent to him.
Well, once we got to be aware of this, which was, there's a commitment by ESCOM to take a loan of about $1.5 billion, if I'm not mistaken, from a China-based company. This Huarong was going to be the agent that facilitated that. For that service of facilitation, there was a payment of what I still thought was $39 million, but the numbers here must be more correct than what I think. When he was confronted, he said, I think I was in the meeting with him. He said, no, he did not sign the agreement. He was told by Anuj Singh, the CFO who was on suspension, I think, at the time, to sign this, who signed the term sheet. His was to honor the details of the term sheet And at certain stages of this, there was a communication between the chairman, Mr. Khoza, and him that kept on asking, actually as recent as the Thursday before we were appointed, to say, have you executed the decision of the board to pay these people? In which he had not yet. So when he finally did, it would appear that he did it on the Thursday or the Friday before we were appointed on the Sunday. So, which made this more problematic for us, that you've just done this and you should have known that you should not. So that was his part in it. But the main agreement was not yet signed, in which case we suspended him and we put him through this disciplinary hearing. And he was charged, and 2 days were set aside to the 8th and the 9th for the hearing. I think he resigned before the start of March.
March 20?
The dates set for the hearing was 8 and 9 March 2018.
Yes.
I think he resigned before the end of February, barely a week after we had confronted him with the charges. Yeah, the Bowman letter to him was the 27th of February. Can go and find exactly the date when he resigned, but it was definitely before the 8th and the 9th of March.
So he resigns before the commencement of the proceedings?
Of the proceedings, yes.
Yes. What we don't have in this bundle is any possible explanation or response of Mr. Maritz to these charges. And I assume that for the present purposes, the chairperson will rely on what you explained to him from the verbal discussions you had with Mr. Maritz.
Yeah, Mr. Maritz was suspended on the 31st of January 2018, which is 9 days since we came in office. Charges were presented to him, as we see in the letter, on the 27th of February 2018. His hearing was scheduled to sit from the 8th and the 9th of March. He resigned with immediate effect on the day he received this notice on the 27th of February. It should say 2018 here, not 2017.
Chair, you'll hear a lot about Huarong on the 1st and the 4th of March.
Yes,
Through the evidence which will be presented by my colleague, Ms. Norman.
yes,
Mr. Maritz has not responded to these charges, but they reflect fundamental questions around state capture. And he's one of those persons who would ask you to invoke a 310 power
yeah.
to tell you his versions about these things. Mr. Mabuza, is there anything that you want to add in relation to Mr. Maritz's involvement in Huarong?
Except related to him, once he was not in our employ, we could do no more, either than handing the matter to the SIU and the Hawks for possible criminal charges, and for us to then pursue civil claims against him for his acts or omission. That's the related to him. We have since received letters of demand from Huarong, which demand we have refused to honor, and we told them they are not, we don't owe them anything. They're not entitled to it. They have threatened, they have, we said, that's fine. So that's where that is. Recently, I think I got a letter from their chairman from China wanting to have coffee, at which point I told him, no, there's no coffee to be had. Mr. Pagamani has told your people that we have no relationship with you, there's no need to have coffee with you. To the extent you feel you've got a claim, please do what you must. That's where the matter is at. So we have not paid the $39 million or the $340 million rands. Neither did we take the 1.5, if that's the number, $1 billion as a loan. So, so far, we're waiting for the claim.
Has Horong not declared an arbitration dispute against you, against ESCOM?
They said they would. They said they would. As I said, the last communication I remember was from their chairman of the holding company in China, saying, let's sure this is something we can talk about over coffee. Did not think so.
As a matter of interest, what we read in the newspapers about Transnet is that its board had authorized civil suit against former executives or even present executives who had exposed Transnet to all sorts of financial losses. From your part, what has the board done in regard to persons who are now beyond its reach by reason of termination of employment relationship, so far as the losses ESCOM may have suffered by reason of their ill conduct?
Chairman, without sounding like we think we've done better than anybody, to the extent they were our employees, we've tried to discipline. When they resigned, we could not follow that. To the extent we could pursue criminal charges, we have done. As in the papers, it would become evident that there are case numbers for that, and we've handed that matter to the various law enforcement agencies. We have not yet laid any civil action, which does not mean we don't intend to, we will. Furthermore, we had thought we should prioritize getting the money. So we have been able to have banked 1 billion rands that we did get back from McKinsey. We are in the course of getting the other 600 million from Trillion. We have not paid the $340 million here. So, yeah, I think Transnet gives us a good action to aspire to, and we committed to do that. But for now, if it's cold comfort, we've managed to put 1 billion, 1.1 billion rands to be exact in ESCOM's bank accounts. And we'll continue to use all the various processes to get whatever was stolen from ESCOM, and we'll continue when we can't, on the criminal basis, pursue civil charges. This is not yet finished.
Yes. Now, thank you very much, and we're grateful to hear that there are effective civil processes to recover whatever was lost, at least to some degree. Chair, I have explored the back end of the disciplinary processes. I'm now going to jump to the front end. And the reason why we started at the back end was simply to give a perspective of someone who was in the employ of ESCOM at the time when the new board came in and how the new board dealt with him. So with your leave, I would go then back to section 2 of part A, which begins at page 5.
Yes, thank you. You may proceed.
Mr. Mabuza, what is that document on page 5?
Page 5.
The very bundle that we're working on.
Need
If
help?
you page it backwards to the front of it, under section 2,
Page 5 in this numbering. Oh, yeah. Got it? Yes. This is a letter from Bowman's to Mr. Koko, putting charges to him.
the date of that letter,
The date of this letter is the 7th of February 2018.
all right, you will see that the date of that letter comes almost 2 to 3 weeks before the charges against Mr. Maritz that we have previously dealt with. So as a matter of sequence, I assume that you authorized Bowman to initiate disciplinary processes on your behalf against Mr. Koko before Mr. Maritz.
Correct, Mr. Chairman, and if it helps, as indicated when we came in, there was a list of 7 names. Of these 7 names, I personally have not met a number of these people. The one that I met was the 8th, Mr. Maritz,
Yes.
who was in office, and the other one that who's on this list that I have since met was Mr. Masango, who got reinstated after being suspended when we had arrived. So I think it's important that I mention most of these people that are here were not at ESCOM when we arrived. Mr. Koko was not at ESCOM when we arrived,
Yes.
owing to a previous disciplinary process that he had challenged. The only interaction we had to have with Mr. Koko was when the Labour Court ordered that he be reinstated. And we respected the court order, and he was reinstated. And he was coming back to ESCOM, at which case I would have met him. So as of today, I've never met him. But he was reinstated and was supposed to start, I guess, on a Wednesday or a Monday. Or the day he was supposed to come back, he was in Parliament. So he couldn't come on that Wednesday. He was going to come the following Monday. But by this time, we as the ESCOM board had taken the view that the disciplinary hearing from which he's been cleared from was a sham, but we could not defy a court order. We decided we were going to place charges in front of him and a disciplinary process that is not a sham, and not a spray and pray charges. There were other charges that were being spoken of, one of which was the impulse. We chose not to. We picked the 4 that we thought would stick, and we presented them to him, and we viewed them serious enough that we did not think it was worth him coming to the office and then suspended. We told him, this is serious enough that don't come here. Go to the disciplinary hearing on the appointed date. Yes, and that date did come, and we can get to talk about the charges, and I would love to talk about those charges.
Yes, I can see that you're getting worked up, but we'll get to them. Mr. Mabuza, you said that the previous charges were a sham. In what sense?
I don't know ESCOM processes, but those charges, there's no way they would have stuck. As I said, I read in the newspapers that he was being begged to appoint the chairman to prosecute him, and as bad when it is convenient for him. And as it turned out, I was not surprised when the charges could not stick.
Yes.
But this time we were clear that we're going to take due process, get an independent chairman, describe the charges in a manner that was not ambiguous, very laser pointed. We were not surprised that it turned out the way it did.
Yes. And I see that the letter that we're dealing with on page 5 was addressed to Mr. Asgar Gani, G-A-N-I. Who is Mr. Gani?
Mr. Asgar Gani is the lawyer of record representing Mr. Koko.
And I see that a number of people were copied. One of them is Mr. Kasim. Who's Mr. Kasim, and why was he copied?
Mr. Kasim was copied, I think, because he was going to be the independent chairman. We would have asked Advocate Kasim to chair this.
So it's not in dispute that Mr. Gani got this letter together with the charges on behalf of his client.
That's correct.
Let's deal with the essence of the charges, or if not the text of them, depending on how you want to deal with them. I don't want to constrain you. They begin on page 6. And I'd like you to deal with charge 1.
Thank you, Chairman. I would love to now try to be as slow so that I can hear myself. Charge 1, you breached your duties and responsibility as executive and or acted in a conflict of interest with your position and or in breach of item 2.35 of the code, and or you conducted yourself in a way that is unacceptable in terms of ESCOM's values and ethics, and in particular in breach of clause 3.6.2 of the Code of Ethics Procedure 322757, prohibiting the distribution of confidential ESCOM documents to any third party, in that between at least July 2015 and November 2015, you distributed from your ESCOM email account and your personal email account and or failed to take steps to prevent such distribution using your personal email account, highly confidential ESCOM documents, including contractual negotiation memoranda, a letter to the Minister of Public Enterprises, a financial spreadsheet, and minutes of the Executive Committee of the ESCOM Board to a third party. This breaches ESCOM's policies and procedures, amounts to, amongst other things, a serious breach of fiduciary duties. Before I step off charge 1, I would, the third tab after this, so that I complete my story,
Yes.
relates to the same charge. It is just better articulated and more detailed under that page 39. This is the charge to to Susan Daniels. It's the same charge, but here it is worth going into a bit detail because the same charge.
So both of them are facing
The same charge.
Okay.
The same charge. So as I was at the point where I say, failed to take steps to prevent distribution using your personal email of highly confidential documents, ESCOM documents, to a third party, including draft statements from the chairperson of ESCOM, a draft contractual document, and a draft letter to the email address businessmaninfoportal1@zoho.com. This breaches ESCOM policies and procedures, amounts to, amongst other things, a serious breach of your fiduciary duties to ESCOM. Based on information accessed from the server mails of Mr. Koko and information in the public domain, the email address businessmaninfoportal1@zoho.com is likely to be the email address of Mr. Salim Issa, an associate of the Gupta family, and the shareholder in a number of companies involved in supplying ESCOM goods and services, including Tegeta and Trillion. You also received and implemented input on the drafting of an ESCOM public statement regarding contracts linked to the Gupta family from this person. These two breaches the ESCOM policy and procedures amounts, amongst other things, to a serious breach of your fiduciary duties to ESCOM. So ESCOM believes that info portal, businessman info portal 1@zoho.com is likely to be the email of Mr. Salim Issa. And we have provided the commission with documentation that comes out of this various server to this effect.
Yes. Chair, you remember when we addressed you on Wednesday, we referred to the report of Funduzi, which
Yes.
mentioned this email address,
Yes.
and we were quite careful not to pin down a specific name as the addressee.
Yes, you just mentioned that it will its importance would be apparent later.
Yes.
Yes.
And ESCOM's investigations and the evidence of the chairperson based on the investigation is that that email belongs to a specific individual whose name is now mentioned.
Yeah, okay.
We will get to the details. I may mention that on Monday, I will give you another bundle of detailed email documentation that was given to us this morning by the lawyers of ESCOM. I have not looked at it, but let's deal with the chairperson's knowledge of these matters as arising from the charge sheet that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Mr. Mabuza, before we step off charge 1, on page 6, which we have now linked with charge 1 from page 39 to page 40.
Correct.
Can I ask you some few questions of clarity, because the charge talks in general terms as it refers to a number of individuals. The first thing is that it relates to contractual memoranda in a letter to the Minister of Public Enterprise and financial spreads and minutes of the Executive Committee of the Board. Can I elicit some details to the extent that you are able to help us on these generalities? First thing first, who was the Minister of Public Enterprises at the time? Who is referred to in this charge?
At the time, the Minister of Public Enterprise was Minister Lynn Brown.
And the negotiating memoranda that you refer to here, to which negotiations did they relate?
These negotiations were related in part to Tegeta Optimum Coal. They were related to Mackenzie. This one specifically was relating to Mackenzie. The public would remember that there was a time when there were various pulling and pushing within ESCOM about to settle, to charge or not to charge Mackenzie. So this relates to that, and the appointment or otherwise of Trillion linked to that as a subcontract. This was predominantly about the Mackenzie Trillion appointment.
Yes. As far as we're able to pick up from the reports we have presented to the chairperson, negotiations with Mackenzie relating to the so-called Top Engineers project began in April 2015. Are you able to place some context as to whether the memoranda you're referring to, insofar as they dealt with the negotiations?
Not with specific details.
Not specifically. All right. And then the financial spreadsheet and minutes of the executive committee of the board that you referred to, are you able to just give us a snapshot of at what point in time did they relate to?
Let me find that.
I'm at page 6 of the...
I need to find this actual detail. Thank you. If I can just go through a few of those points.
Yeah, give us the page first.
On page 27,
27.
I'm dealing with paragraph 15.
Yes.
15.1, can I proceed? May I proceed?
Yes, you may proceed. 15.1, you said?
Yes,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman. On the 20th of July 2017 at 7:56, Mr. Koko sends an email from email address Machela Koko, kokomm@eskom.co.za to infoportal1@zoho.com, re internal consulting directives PDF with a message in quotes, please print. This is an attachment, in quotes, internal consulting directive 2 PDF, which is an ESCOM directive regarding directive for the implementation of the National Treasury Cost Containment Instruction and Government Gazette. This policy deals extensively with the appointment of consultants, as it is referred to on this spec as Annexure SM1. Again, on the 20th of July, now I'm 15.2, on the 20th of July at now 7:57, 1 minute later, an email is sent from email address Machela Koko, kokomm@eskom.co.za to infoportal1@zoho.com with the subject, Top Engineers 2 PDF. An attachment is forwarded. This is a PDF, Top Engineers 2 PDF, and PDF it has, in quotes, approval conditions agreed between acting CFO and acting Group Executive GC and T. On Friday, 26 June 2015, Top Engineers Development Program, C. Top Engineering Development Program is one of the names given to the McKinsey 2016 contract discussed in Annexure SM2. Also, on the 20th of July, 2015, at 8 o'clock, 8:01, 4 minutes later, seemingly a duplicate of the email above, an email is sent from email address Machela Koko, kokomm@eskom.co.za to infoportal1@zoho.com with subject Top Engineers 2 PDF, which we show in the pack as Annexure SM3. Also, on the 20th of July at 8:01, an email is sent from email address Machela Koko, kokomm@eskom.co.za to infoportal@zoho.com, re-exco resolution PDF with a message, print this one too. And the attachment is an ESCOM round robin resolution dated March 2014. And the title of the submission is Business Case for the Creation of a Permanent Top Engineer Program that will A, help to deliver an accelerated critical business project for ESCOM, whilst reducing dependency on external consultants, and B, continue the development of top engineers beyond the foundational year currently on offer. This is shown in Annexure SM4. On the 8th of August 2015, at 22,
So,
this 15.5.
sorry, Mr. Mabuza, it appears that from 15.1 to 15.4, all those emails were sent quite quickly, one after the other,
Yes, it would.
in the morning.
Yes, it would.
Yes, okay. Now you move to
The evening,
8th of August.
which started to be now late in the evening.
Yeah, okay.
That's correct.
Yes, you may proceed.
On the 8th of August, on 2015, at 22:20 and 12 seconds, an email is sent from Mr. Koko's email address at Eskom, Matsela Koko, kokomm@eskom.co.za, to infoportal1@zoho.com with the subject, online vending PDF, and the message, I quote, "We did not finish our discussion about this transaction. This is what is going to the board on the 18th of August. This email has attachment online vending PDF, which is a submission to the executive committee, the EXCO procurement subcommittee. I referred to it earlier as the ETC, here they call it the EXCOPS.
Yes.
On the 14th of August 2015. Submission to the board tender committee on the 18th of August 2015. Feedback on the results of the negotiations held to negotiate but not conclude with 10 service providers for the provision of online vending agency services selling prepaid electricity on behalf of Eskom. This we refer as Annexure SM8. On the 21st of September 2015, another email is sent from Mr. Koko's email address, being kokomm@eskom.co.za to infoportal@zoho.com, dated 2015-09-21, and this is sent at 16 hours, 32 minutes and 3 seconds, with the subject, me, and attached, disciplinary intention to suspend PED 3108-2015 SNP, docs, which is a letter on an Eskom letterhead with the subject, intention to effect suspension with pay pending investigation into alleged misconduct and or disciplinary action, addressed to a Mr. Petla. This we show in Annexure SM10.
I'm sure you'll come back to the details, but
Thank
just this letter of suspension is on Eskom's version addressed to Mr. Petla. Who's Mr. Petla?
It would appear Mr. Petla was an executive at Eskom.
All right. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I don't know that. Shall I proceed?
Yes.
On the 30th of September 2015, an email is sent from Mr. Koko, Machela, kokomm@eskom.co.za to infoportal1@zoho.com, dated 2015-09-30 at 14 hours, 47 minutes, 22, with subject This attached is a photo image of a letter from Dr. Ngubane to the Minister, Lynn Brown, suspension of contact in any form whatsoever and commercial relationship with the Mail and Guardian, City Press, and Sunday Times. There is no message. This is shown as SM15 as an annexure.
Yes.
On 14 November 2015, an email is sent from Mr. Koko's email address, kokomm@eskom.co.za to infoportal1@zoho.com, dated 14 November 2015 1036 with the subject RE and attached label 3D Docs. This document is titled Electricity Load Shedding Review and the Way Forward. There is no message. We show this as Annexure SM18. 15.9, on the 25th of November 2015, an email from the email address cocomm@eskom.co.za to infoportal1@zoho.com, dated 25 November 2015 at 15 hours 47 minutes. There is no title here, but the message in quotes, "Give the boss, please." There is an attachment entitled 2015-1125, Total Cost Plus Mine Investments by Eskom, Future Fuel. This attachment is a financial spreadsheet, which we attach as SM19. So these are the details, Mr. Chairman, relating to that charge one about the Mackenzie consultants, engineers, as we now got to realize, and a little bit more.
Yes.
Thank you.
Before we leave the emails, one of them that strikes me as odd, and I may be uninformed, is in paragraph 15.8. This talks about load shedding, review, and way forward. We will obviously look at Annex SM18. But insofar as context is important to the question that I'd like to pose to you, is that you would, do you know whether Eskom sometime in April commissioned an entity called Dentons to assist it with all the problems it had that led to load shedding? Do you know about that exercise undertaken by the board of Eskom at the time?
I know of it from public report. As you would recall, I was not yet inside Eskom, but yes, I've heard about the Denton, the Bowman's report. Yes, I have heard about it.
Yes. We have presented to the chairperson a copy of that Bowman report, and we owe him a summarized executive version of it. The Denton's report recommended a number of remedial measures arising from its findings relating to the problems of load shedding at Eskom. At the time, I wonder whether you as the new board have had an occasion to reflect. What are the problems that Eskom is encountering? Which are the primary or contributory causes to load shedding? And I ask you that question in the context of the fact that load shedding did not end in 2008 when it was picked up by NESA. In 2015, when Bowman was called upon and commissioned to investigate, it still persists. Now, so my question is, have you as a board had occasion to reflect on the primary causes of load shedding?
Chairman, load shedding is what is currently happening, and we have experienced it in the term of this board towards the end of December last year. Prior to that, we had experienced it at the back of the industrial action we have had in June, July. We've seen it in the last about 10 days ago for an extended period of about 5 days. We started to get involved in dealing with this issue of load shedding in the December incidences that occurred, wherein the operational team was kicked into gear. We addressed the public and we undertook that we will do all we can with what is now famously known as the 9-point plan to ensure that we do not have load shedding until the 15th of January at least, and we can come back and take stock now. But maybe at this point I need to, and we've covered this at some detail earlier, that it is important, and this is not an excuse or obfuscation of any nature. It is important to just remember what were the issues facing ESCOM at the time when this board was put in office to come and address those issues. We've dealt with those issues extensively, and they are by and large about liquidity, going concern, financial issues. So it therefore stands to reason that the problem statement being financial issues, ethical issues, cleanup issues, it's that being the problem statement, the solution had to be find people that would deal with this problem that was in hand. So the deputy president at the time and the government, I think, did what they had to do to deal with the problem statement at the time. What we are now having is not the problem that we had at the time. Maybe we should have foreseen it. So what that is now calling for is seen in the public domain comments about the competence or the ability or otherwise of people in the leadership of ESCOM to deal with these operational and technical issues. Clearly, that's not what the skills they are endowed with. Now, knowing what we now know, I think we need to be saying we need to get people of skills either to augment or replace the current skill set, if we agreed that the purpose for which the skill set was brought in had been sorted out, and if it does re-emerge, we will deal with it then, and make space for people that have got the skills that are required to do so, to address issues of an operational nature, of a technical nature. And really, I don't claim anything more than understanding the mechanics of how an engine, a differential, and a gearbox mechanically move wheels of a taxi and how fuel and combustion works. Which I can just assume that that's what happens when you put fire to boil water, to generate steam, to turn a turbine. But I have no ability about that. So it does concern us, which is why, whilst dealing with issues of funding, of sustainability of the organization, we'll have to continue to engage all the stakeholders in the financial community. But also on the other side, we need to now deal with the issues of operation, issues of the ESCOM plant that is on average 38 years, issues of the non-maintenance of these. Over the last 5 years, various leadership of ESCOM have taken the decision to spend half of what they had to spend on maintenance. Now, things mechanical, they do wear and tear. These are big mechanical things that have had big wears and tears. And the effect of them has been that much devastating to the economy, the existing economy, but the investments that the country is trying to attract without the energy to fuel that. So we have been engaging, as I said, the Chairman, we are engaging various stakeholders on the one side to deal with the viability, financial stuff, the operation, the people issues, but now there are these operational, mechanical, and technical issues, and many South Africans have responded to the Tumamina by raising their hands. The engineering community have raised their hands to say we hear. The academic community have raised their hands. Previous employees of ESCOM have come forward and say, and the minister would have made certain announcement about these to say we need to assemble this team, send them to the sites to do audits of the state and the condition of the plant factually, to be able to know the state of the plant given what they were set out to produce relative to what they're producing, which is clearly less, and why they are producing, and what to do to make them produce what they were set up to produce. This is both on the old plants, the 38-year-old plants, and the new build plants, that it has become clear that they are not producing that which they were built to produce for a variety of reasons, and how to get them to that level, both in terms of what actual work needs to be done to the equipment and what technical skills need to be done to this equipment, and also to get in a little bit more detail to check, has it got anything with the quality, the quantity, or its people's skills or lack thereof. So these, most of the other people that have responded to Tumamina, I've seen some of the offers on tweets that says ESCOM must do this coming weekend. So we are pulling all that together to try and address this to the extent we can. And as I said, the president has appointed a task team. There's another cabinet committee. We've heard now there's another chief restructuring officer. So there are a lot of people coming in to help. Clearly, this problem cannot be solved by ESCOM alone. What I, on behalf of the board that I lead, want to say is, to the extent we don't know what this is, so that we don't understand the problem, chances are that we are unlikely to understand the solution. And to the extent we occupy spaces that can be occupied by other South Africans that are responding to this Tumamina that can do that, we're only too happy to do that. And the shareholder knows our interest and commitment to not be obstructive, but to be, because we do want to have this problem solved once and for all. And indeed, I have approached one of the law firms that had advised the government as way back as 2010, 2008 about what to do, and they've given us the material. We'll send all that into the big pot where everybody's trying to find a solution. And we'll take the Denton's report also into that mix.
Yeah. Chair, see, it's already 4 o'clock.
Yes. I spoke a few days ago, maybe including yesterday, I think including yesterday, about the fact that we may need to start early or finish later than normal in order to make sure that the time that we will lose on Monday afternoon is we find those 2 hours somewhere.
Yes.
One, I don't know whether you might have had a chance to, or a member of the legal team may have had a chance to discuss that with Mr. Mabuza, because he will still be giving evidence on Monday, and what his attitude might be, his availability to start earlier or finish later. So if not, maybe this is the time to talk about that, because if it suits everybody, we could take another hour, but obviously there is no point in taking another hour today if maybe he's going to finish about lunchtime tomorrow, on Monday, and therefore we wouldn't need, we would have hours that we were not going to use anyway for the hearing. But you would have a better picture of what your estimate is in terms of when on Monday we might finish with this evidence, and whether or not somebody has had a chance to discuss with him the possibility of finishing later or starting earlier.
Chair, we agreed yesterday that today we'll finish at 4.
Yes, okay.
And Mr. Mabuza is here. His lawyers know that you did request that we should start earlier on Monday.
Okay.
I would prefer that we start earlier,
On
even though I'm quite comfortable
Yeah.
that I'll finish
Yes.
by lunchtime.
Yeah.
But I've been wrong before. So,
I think either you or somebody in the legal team was quite wrong a few days ago when we had quite a number of hours that we didn't use.
Yes.
But your assessment is that we should finish about lunchtime on
Yes,
Monday,
yes.
but you suggest that it might be a good precaution to start earlier than 10 o'clock on Monday.
yes, subject to Mr. Mabuza's
Yes.
availability.
Mr. Mabuza, how is your situation? If we were to start at 9 on Monday, would 9 or 9, would that be fine with you?
Mr. Chairman, I'm good to go for another hour tonight.
Yes.
I'm good to start an hour earlier on Monday.
On Monday.
I will just need to juggle my doctor's appointment because I too am a mechanical being. I need to tell my doctors that I will try and see them in the afternoon or another date. I'm okay to
you'll
start
be okay.
as early as is
Okay.
determined.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Okay, then you said that you would prefer that we don't take another hour now, but we take it on Monday morning.
Yes.
Okay, no, that's all right then. We'll adjourn now, but on Monday we will start at 9.
Yes, and Chair, before we adjourn, can I ask for your permission to hand up copies of the email and associated documents referred to by Mr. Mabuza?
Yes.
They have
that's
been made available to us this morning.
Yes,
2 things, I've not looked at them.
yes.
Secondly, they have not been paginated in line with the Commission's processes.
Yes,
But I'd like to hand up a copy to you so
Yeah.
that you familiarize yourself with their contents over the weekend.
Yes,
We will replace them on Monday when
They've been
the
paginated,
appropriate
yeah.
pagination has been done.
no, that's fine, Thank you, Zonaka. Thank you.
And Chair, that would then conclude today's proceedings, subject to your direction.
Yes, no, thank you. We will then adjourn, and then, as I said, we'll resume at 9 o'clock on Monday. The Commission adjourns.
This is the second time.
I can leave these files here. No, the ones that I found here.